So what is it that makes a good, practical combat knife? It's probably not that, unless you live in the 15th century, maybe. Welcome back to the shop. Thank you for joining me again today. I just want to have a simple tabletop discussion. You may notice I've been off the channel for a while. We had a death in the family from a very close family member. And it's really hit everybody kind of hard, so we're kind of still reeling from that and trying to kind of figure out just life going forward, and that's just part of life. So it was tragic and unexpected, and so I've not really had a lot of time or inclination to be public or spend any time on the interwebs right now as we're grieving as a family. So today, just a simple tabletop discussion. One I've wanted to get into for a long time is that what is it that makes a good combat knife or a good practical, daily carry type of duty knife for military, law enforcement, field use, even maybe some bushcrafting, doing some bushcrafting with it if needed, or hunting, that kind of thing. And it's a topic and a subject that you can go around in circles with endlessly about what actually qualifies. And if you look through different historical periods, you're going to find different examples of what an actual combat or duty knife or a daily duty knife looks like. All right, so as a custom maker, I've been looking for years for something to have in my catalog, one or multiple knives to have in my catalog that kind of fill that role of a duty knife or a combat knife. And to really, let's just really clarify what a duty knife is. To me, combat knives and duty knives are kind of two different things. A combat knife is something I think of more along the lines of actual hand-to-hand combat fighting style knives. Okay, let's bring 15th century, a Keon dagger. 16th, 15th, 14th century, Keon dagger, an offhand weapon, was your daily carry, your personal protection knife, something you would carry on your side and you would use for defending yourself. Even in sword combat, you would need a secondary weapon or an offhand weapon for guard and defense, or say you're in polite settings, you need something that is a little more discreet than a full-size rapier or longsword or whatever. And so the dirk or the dagger was kind of the duty or combat carry knife of the day back then. Fast forward in time, you get into the gun era, rifle era, trench warfare, that type of thing. Your bayonet would be a combat knife. You look to stuff like the bayonet, the old school style bayonets. You'd fix them on your rifle, and you could do combat stuff with that. It would be something that soldiers would also carry on their side. Just prior to that, say American colonial time frame, Revolutionary War, the Bowie knife really became kind of, and the Bowie knife being kind of a derivation of dirks and side knives and stuff like that carried by the European settlers. The Bowie knife really in America became the iconic combat knife or duty knife for self-defense, for daily field tasks in use in the field and stuff. It was an all-around use knife. And so the dagger and the bayonet became less, in daily life, the dagger and the bayonet are less practical for daily use, you know what I mean? So they're kind of specific, is kind of the point I'm getting to, is that the bayonet and the dagger are very specific combat-oriented fighting weapons. But when I think of a duty knife, or when I think of a field knife, or even a combat knife, I kind of think of it different as to a fighting knife. A fighting knife is something, really intently geared towards and just purposeful for fighting, like a dagger. You need to be able to stab and jab with that sucker, right? That's what a dagger really is. And they're not the most practical when it comes to, even if it was a shorter version of this, like say a 5-inch version of this, it's not the most practical thing to want to carry around and use for your daily cutting tasks, okay? So it doesn't really fill the role of a duty or combat knife, because a combat knife to me kind of more leans toward not just something for fighting with and doing hand-to-hand combat with, but something that is capable in a utilitarian purpose in combat environments, or in hostile environments, or in harsh or hard environments, field environments, hunting and stuff like that. So the dagger's not the most practical for that. So both forward and backwards in time, you can see the evidence of what fills that role in a duty knife in the Bowie knife. And that's really, you know, maybe I should do a video covering specifically the topic of the Bowie knife, but the Bowie knife itself kind of inspires more my style or my idea of what a duty knife really is. Because it's a practical blade, sometimes a little on the longer side, useful in a fight if needed. James Bowie proved that, and several others throughout the American West and the Western expansion and the wilderness days and the frontier days and stuff like that proved that a good long-bladed knife was pretty important to have around or on you just to defend yourself and to, you know, use for animal, use for boar, use for dispatching game, use for camp tasks and stuff like that. So the Bowie knife really came into its own, say 1800s, 1600s forward in America in our own lexicon of the iconic knife. All right, so fast forwarding to that, you get into the era of like World War I, World War II, where there's a lot of trench warfare, and knives like you see like the V42 dagger, the Fairbairn-Sykes dagger, and those kind of things really start to kind of solidify their place in the pantheon of American iconic combat knives. But they had their drawbacks. You know, they're more, actually were more dagger oriented, and again, daggers not being the best for a duty knife. They're great for a fighting knife, a specific weapon just for fighting, you know, and you know, combat oriented hand-to-hand tasks. But combat's more than just hand-to-hand, and in most contexts it's not hand-to-hand for most people. So that knife, even out in the American West and in the Western expansion and stuff like that, daily combat with knives was not actually part of the biggest part of people's lives. They needed a knife that they could use for general tasks. And again, a dagger doesn't lend itself to being the best for that because of the blade shape and style and type of a double-sided blade, maybe not the most sharp blade out there and stuff like that. So just without beating that dead horse too much longer, I have decided and tried to design over the years something that fills the role that I could carry both as a prior military guy, something I would carry, and it has, my work has always been inspired by things I did carry, like this. This is a EK Commando. Hold on. Okay, yeah, this is a Commando. Made in Effingham, Illinois. I carried this one for a lot of years, and I think it's got like a 7-inch-ish blade, maybe 8 inches. It's a pretty big blade. It's Bowie clip point style blade. Still has enough of an aggressive spear point-ish tip with a double grind on it to, you know, jab and stab if you needed to. But it's got a nice big handle for, you know, working and doing, you know, really getting a lot of good grip for, you know, good tasks and stuff like that. Actually, I used this one during the beginning of Operation Iraqi Freedom. I was deployed to a contingency base with the bombers, right? And we're talking English countryside, not forward deployed in Iraq or Afghanistan, but in the English countryside. But we had such a problem with protesters that we had to put up a lot of physical security measures and stuff like that, flares and razor wire, the whole 9 yards. It was a nightmare, actually, in the English countryside of all places. So this was actually the duty knife I carried there for pounding flares in and setting traps and you know, setting up C-wire and razor wire and cutting stuff. And it turned out to be a really great knife. It's a little on the big side, though. I mean, it's over 12 to 13 inches long with a massive, almost 6-inch handle, and it's kind of iconic in its styling, with a brass guard and, you know, wooden handles and walnut handles and stuff like that, and brass pins. So it turned out to be a really good knife, but it wasn't a great knife in a lot of ways because it was too big. It was too big for a lot of tasks, and it had, you know, just some profile issues that I didn't love. All right, so as I matured as a military member, I kind of started leaning more towards smaller knives, you know, say 4 to 5 inch blades, still liking the Bowie style. I leaned more towards those. Pocket knives weren't the most practical in the military. They still aren't for a lot of reasons. I mean, they're the most practical for civilian carry, just daily kicking around in your pocket, because they have the benefit of small size and easy carry. But when it comes to more robust use, the blades and locking mechanisms and all those things are just not that great for long-term hard use. So that's what brings us to duty knives. I have gone through so many iterations of what a fighter and a Bowie knife or a combat knife really are throughout my 15 years of making knives now, but I've kind of narrowed it down, and just in the last year really come to grips with some of the designs that are discovered some of the designs for myself, or refined some of my designs to the point to where I really think I have what to me is my perfect kind of set, a general overall set of a duty knife, a combat knife. So I'm going to start with my Model 1. The Model 1 to me is, after years of developing the style and stuff and kind of deciding what I want to put in a knife, the Model 1 is my iconic duty knife that that's why I call it my Model 1. It is what to me would be considered the perfect larger size duty knife, combat knife. It has a 6-inch clipped point. This one has a raised point, so this is the Model 1 Mark II. Has the raised clip on it. Stainless steel blade with an integral guard, okay, or a split guard, so it's full tang. You got a full tang knife. To me, a duty knife, a combat knife needs a full tang. I call this the modern combat Model 1. So a full tang with a split guard, so you still have that guarded usefulness to your knife. You've got a 6-inch edge with a dropped point and a deep belly, so you can actually use for field tasks, cutting deer, gutting game, cutting tasks, and that kind of thing. Simple chole area. I do like a chole. It's not really a finger groove on these, it's too small for that, but I like a chole just for indexing the edge, for sharpness and stuff like that. That's my preference. Some people don't like them. They'd run that straight to the guard, that area right there in the ricasso, which is, kind of a personal preference thing. A 5-inch handle, micarta being my preferred material for handles in all combat duty or otherwise orientated hunting knives, everything. I prefer micarta for everything, actually, because it's just really hard wearing, hard use material that stands up to a lot, and it's very stable. So it's more stable than wood is. And it's harder to shrink and crack and warp and all those things. So to me, micarta's an integral part of the deal. I don't like working with G10, being a fiberglass based thing. I just don't, it's a caustic thing to my lungs and stuff like that, and in the shop and abrasive things, I don't really like working with it. So the Model 1 is kind of the foundation of my combat line, and it is this iteration, the Model 1 right here, is a derivation of about 20 different designs I've worked on over the years. And this is kind of where I ended up. And I've refined them, and I've tweaked them, and I've made and tested and then gone over it again and again. And so this is kind of where I've ended up, and I really enjoyed it. I made also, it's actually become my most popular knife. I carry one now every day myself. I also made, as seen in the last video, I made a sub-hilt version of it. So you kind of get that secondary hilt for kind of lends itself more towards being a fighting knife, for leverage and control and stuff like that. So the knife is a good crossover. The Model 1, my modern combat Model 1, is a good crossover in the 3 iterations I have it. So I have it without the clipped point, with the clip, or the raised point, sorry, without the raised point, with the raised clip, and then as a standard hilt and a sub-hilt model. So that one, the MCO one, is a little bit, the Model 1 I have is a little bit on the larger size though, for what a lot of people may want to carry in the field, for your field knife, your duty knife, field knife. So kind of going along with that theme, I took the similar to that style blade, and I adopted it to more of my stylized handle shape that I use in a lot of my blades that I really like. It's kind of a Tonto inspired handle. It's a Tonto inspired handle with a 3-finger or 2-finger groove area right below the guard. All right, so you've got a lot of great leverage there, but you still have space to move your hand forward and backwards in multiple grip styles. So it's a bizarre looking handle style. It's kind of reminiscent of the tracks on a tank. But this knife is my tanker Bowie, which I actually have one right here. I'm in the process of working up. So same, again, it's full tang, micarta handles bolted on with Corby rivets, split guard, and a stainless blade, and it's done in the clipped Bowie, or kind of a clipped Tonto style more than the clipped Bowie. So the belly's not quite as rounded, it's more pronounced here like a Tonto blade would be. So it's kind of a clip point Tonto. that to me is like a duty knife. Like I could put this on any piece of gear I have or my belt, and it's only 10 inches long overall, so it's 5 and 5, 5-inch blade, 5-inch handle, and it would work in just about every scenario for just about everything you can think of in the field. It could be used as a fighting knife if you want to pretend that still exists today. For most people it does, for some people, but not for many. But if you wanted to call it a fighting knife, something you had to defend yourself with, this is definitely something you could do it with, but it's still a little bit smaller than the Model 1 and can fit on a belt maybe a little better, or on your gear, on your pack a little better. Moving down the line, and I'll for comparison's sake, I actually adopted a smaller version of the tanker, the mini tanker. So this is a smaller version. It's only 9 inches overall, or hold on, no, it's 8.5 inches overall. Called the mini tanker. It's got 4 to 4.5 inch blade, same style, just scaled down, same concept. And I have one of those right here, this little guy. So this would be like a everyday carry duty knife, like small clipped Tonto style blade. So I still have my clipped Tonto thing going on there, which is a neat looking blade, hollow ground. I like hollow grounds and swedges, that's just my jam. The smaller handle, so it's still got that Tonto inspired handle with you know, kind of more stylized with finger groove and an integrated split guard in it. So you still have your guard, your full tapered tang, and everything's good. This is something which would really go well in the hunting knife category. Like this is almost a perfect size for a hunting pack, you know, hiking, backpacking, that kind of thing, or just daily carry on your belt. You carry it on a horizontal pouch, life is good, or inside the waistband or anything like that. And being that this whole line I'm talking about right now, and what to me, and this is really just a discussion about what makes a good combat knife. There's a lot of opinions out there. There's a lot of great valid inputs and thoughts on there. What makes a good duty combat slash field knife slash or versus a fighting knife, or versus, you know, X, Y, and Z. These are just where I've ended up as a maker and kind of why. So this is the small one, the mini tanker. I'm going to be putting these in my catalog. I think they'll be pretty useful. I'm going to use this one this year for hunting season and just kind of test it out. You know, just give it a run. I really like the tanker, the full-size tanker myself. I've had a lot of great response from my customers and collectors with it, so I'm going to keep going with that in my line. I'm adding that to the catalog. But then also on the other side of things, I've always had a fascination with medieval weaponry, with historical weaponry, with knives and daggers especially. And so looking back through American history, you see a lot of different types of Bowie knife. The Bowie knife itself was not really a one specific, this blade, this length, this etc., etc. It just kind of is a descriptor for a genre of knives. Everywhere from the California Gold Rush to the East Coast, or to the Tennessee mountains where I'm at, the Appalachians, you know, the frontier, you know, when that was the frontier and stuff like that, and, you know, James Bowie and stuff like that, and David Crockett. Like David Crockett Homestead is 10 miles from where I live, and it's cool because it's cool being in a historical area, because you see a lot of reenactment around here, you see a lot of enthusiasts around here, and you see a lot of historical examples around here of the knives that the frontiersmen carried. And if you go a little further west, you get more out into the California Gold Rush era in the 1800s and stuff like that, you start to see the development of a crossover between the Bowie knife and the dagger. And you see that exemplified in what they call the California dagger, or the California Bowie, or the Price dagger. There's a maker named Michael Price and several others in California, and companies like Will and Fink and stuff like that, that developed a very, very iconic style of Bowie knife called the California Bowie, California dagger. I don't know if you can see that really well here. Let me try to get that. And what it is basically a dagger, single ground. So you got your spear point blade, single ground, so single edge, single bevel, with a clip, with a sometimes sharpened, but oftentimes not, false edge on the back, a smaller false edge on the back. So adding to my line of knives that kind of fill my combat or duty knife, or, you know, fighting knife category, I've started playing around with the idea of a California Bowie. This is a 5.5-inch version. I actually just made the prototype to it this last couple days. This guy right here, I have, oh, come on. Let me get this off there, okay. So this guy right here, I made this one in 80CRV2, which is a kind of a newer steel for me. I don't mess with a whole lot, but I've enjoyed playing with it. I've got some sword projects I'm working on, and this is what I'm going to be using for it. So I wanted to play around with it for some Bowie knives. So this is the California Bowie, or the California San Francisco style dagger that I've developed and am working on. This one has got a 5.5-inch blade. Yeah, 5.5-inch blade with the clip on it. Okay, so it's an unsharpened swedge, more or less. It's not a clip, it's a swedge. So it's unsharpened, and the single ground blade, hollow ground deep. I'm used 3/16-inch 80CRV2 for this one, and then I acid etched it. So I actually did an antiquing etch on it to try to get that kind of antique look. It's got oil and stuff on it right now, so it's kind of shiny, but I roughed up the flats, and I textured and hit them with a wire brush, left some of the mill scale on there, and then I kind of left some of the decarb on there after heat treat too. And then I polished out the bevels to a 600, ground them out to 600, and then etched them. So this has been a lot of fun. This is kind of a combat oriented, more of a fighting oriented knife. But to me, it still has a useful characteristic in that it's not a double ground dagger blade. It's got an actual bellied blade that could be used for skinning game and for field tasks, or just general use in the camp, that kind of thing. It's actually a really great amalgamation of the crossover between a fighting knife, saying a dagger, a Bowie knife, a utilitarian combat knife, and a field knife, something that just for general duty use. I mean, this is actually could be a really useful blade for that. So I'm going to be playing around with this idea a lot in the coming months, and kind of just developing a style for that, developing a build and construction style for that, because it's going to be a little different. It's not going to be full tang, it's going to be hidden tang with a threaded pommel in the back and everything. And then I have also a shorter version of it that I have played around with. There we go. This one would be called like maybe a pillow dagger or a lady's dagger. It's a 4.5-inch blade, slightly thinner overall, maybe a little more elegant, and maybe that's something that's more decorative. But you see that a lot in the California Bowies and in the San Francisco style Bowies from Michael Price and stuff like that. They had a lot of gold quartz handle inlays and silver and gold and this kind of thing going on with them. So they were a little more decorative, a little more stylized. And I think that, to me, is something I can play with and have a lot of fun with, both the decorative side of things there, artistic side of things there with the handles and the materials, and then also a combat related duty San Francisco style dagger or whatever that's 80CRV2 with a black finish. Could be really cool there, micarta handle. So that's just some of my thoughts on what makes a good duty and combat knife to me, why I have chosen the designs that I have and make them the way that I do, and where my catalog is going to be going with this. And there's a lot of opinions about this on what makes a different duty knife. I mean, there's a lot of iconic knives out there too. If you look at just the pure skill and craftsmanship of people like Bill Harsey, Chris Reeves, and several others. I know I'm going to forget somebody out there that have designed some of the most iconic Yarbrough style knives, Yarbrough being a Special Forces commander back in the day. Won't get into a history lesson there. But there's so much in the lexicon of American knife making and in European knife making in relation to combat duty knives that it's such a broad category, and combat versus fighting versus duty knives. It's almost impossible to purely and specifically define just one aspect of the category and just one knife that fills it all. So to me, I've decided to kind of create a broad catalog of knives that fill those roles and could be used kind of a crossover in all of them. But there's just so many talented makers out there, and there's so many talented and iconic knife designers out there that have created such iconic things for the industry, and it's always been inspiring to me. And so that's kind of where I've just tried to put my own voice to it. I've tried to put my own, my own 2 cents into the melting pot of great American combat knives, and I like imparting some of that, Bowie knife aesthetic into it with a little bit of, some of the fantasy and romance of medieval and or Japanese, into those kind of things. So this is the small tanker compared to the Model 1. You see the difference there. And, each of them can have a different place and have a different use, and, every collector or user is gonna find a different draw or desire for a different thing, in a different context for their own use or a style that they like in their knives. And that's the beautiful thing of this industry. There's not really one right answer. There's a lot of talented makers, and then there's a lot of great answers out there for the problem of what makes a good duty knife or combat knife for you. So that's all I got for today. Thank you for joining me again. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share if you'd like to see some more of my works on CalebWhiteKnives.com and Instagram at CalebWhiteKnives and X at CWhiteKnives. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out through my email. That's the best way to contact me right now. I'm not really answering or playing around on DMs a lot on the internet. With social media and stuff, I've been kind of taking a break from that just to kind of dial back and spend time with family and lose that distraction and that kind of stressor that social media that can be sometimes. But what makes a good duty knife to you? What makes a good combat knife in your opinion? What do you look for in a combat knife or a duty knife? I would love to hear from you. Put it in the comments below. Get into the conversation and let me hear your thoughts. Let me hear your conversations with each other. I love to have discourse on this channel. This channel is kind of an eclectic channel. I know it's mostly knife centric, but there's other things we've discussed, firearms and shooting and pipe tobacco and stuff like that. But this conversation, let's have it about knives. What makes a good combat knife to you?